Hi, I've got kind of a powerful, sad, and dynamic and joyful story for you. It's a little bit about hopelessness and a lot of other cool topics, to be honest. But hopelessness is one of the worst emotions that a human being can have, and it's often present when people have depression. You think, I'm a worthless person, I'm going to feel horrible for the rest of my life and things will never change, and you believe that. Absolutely. And that's when people often turn to suicide as the only escape from their suffering. And a colleague, Aaron Beck, once said that as long as you can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and hope for change, you can put up with just about anything. But once you start telling yourself that things are never going to change, that makes everything, 100 times worse. And early in my career, when I was just learning cognitive therapy, it was new and the general public hadn't heard much about it. It was some new treatment for depression. A fellow called the university. He said that his daughter had been hospitalized involuntarily for several years at a mental hospital in the Los Angeles area because she was actively suicidal. She would mutilate herself with razor blades or sharp objects in the mental hospital. If she could find a light bulb and break it, then she'd take the broken glass and mutilate herself. She'd had to take her high school from, tutoring, so she didn't have much interaction with other kids her age, and that no one had been able to help her. And was there any chance that this new cognitive therapy might be something that would be helpful to her? And so I was one of the few cognitive therapists on earth at the time because it was brand new. And so someone from the university, one of the professors, said, we have this request. Would you be willing to have a consultation with this young lady and her father, so they can figure out if maybe they'd want to try cognitive therapy as a new treatment for her daughter to see if there was any hope for her? Because her father was an attorney who specialized in suing mental hospitals and psychiatrists. And so I was really kind of scared of the situation. But she was pleasant enough, and we sat down and I asked her if she had any kind of negative thoughts going through her mind. And she says, yes, one of my thoughts is I'm a lazy human being, so I deserve to die. And so I was thinking, what's a way that I could help her challenge that thought? And thinking about the fact that her dad was an attorney, I said, well, let's imagine that there are two attorneys arguing your case in court. And the prosecuting attorney is trying to convince the jury that you should be put to death. And you can be the prosecuting attorney. And then you can argue, you deserve the death penalty. And I'll be the defense attorney and see if I can challenge some of your arguments. So this kind of caught her fancy, and I later discovered she was a very intelligent young woman, and kind of a fiery young woman, I might say, kind of almost combative. And she said, "Oh, okay, well, I'm the prosecuting attorney, and I want that you gentlemen and ladies of the jury to know that Sharon is lazy, a human being. And so she deserves to die. So convict her and give her the death penalty." And then I said, well, the defense attorney argues that laziness or a lack of motivation is just a symptom of depression. And depression is an illness. And here in the United States, and maybe all around the world, when someone has an illness, we treat them with the best techniques possible rather than condemning them to death. And so I would argue that this young woman needs to have effective, compassionate treatment so she can change the way she feels and change the direction of her life. And that kind of stunned her for a minute. And then she came up with some other argument that she deserved to die, and I challenged it again. And we did a few rounds on that, and by that time the 50 minutes was almost up, and so her father knocked and came back in and sat down and said, "Well, Sharon, what do you think? Do you think you'd want to work with this young doctor?" And she said, Dad, I think it might be worth a shot. And my heart kind of sank because I thought, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? And so he arranged to have her transferred to a mental hospital about a mile from where my office was. And I didn't have visiting privileges at that hospital, but he talked to the president of the hospital, and they arranged that I could meet with her twice a week, sitting, and there's a baseball stadium type of deal behind the hospital, and the president said I could sit with her twice a week on the bleachers and do the cognitive therapy with her to see if that would be helpful to her. One day after she'd been in that mental hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, we'd had twice a week we probably had 5 sessions. I said, Sharon, it isn't clear to me why you've been in mental hospitals all this time, because I don't know if they're doing anything there that's actually helpful to you. And it's so expensive, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a day. I don't know how much it is, but I'm sure it's extraordinarily expensive. And if you were willing to be discharged, and we could talk to the hospital and see if they'd be willing to discharge you, your dad could put you up in an apartment here in the Palo Alto area for a lot less than this cost of being in the hospital. And maybe you could take a couple of summer school classes at Stanford, and then you'd have a chance to interact with kids your age and start learning things and start being in the world, rather see yourself as a human being rather than as a involuntarily hospitalized mental patient. And she said, "Oh, Dr. Burns, you're so stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. I could never compete with the kids from the University of Pennsylvania in the summer school. I haven't even finished high school yet, much less take a college course." And I said, "Well, there you go again, always predicting negative things, fortune telling, and emotional reasoning, and all of this stuff. But you don't know that that's true, and you wouldn't know until you tried it." And so she very reluctantly agreed and got out of the hospital and went to lived in an apartment, started, let's to disguise things a little bit, let's say she was taking courses at Stanford summer school. And she would come to my office every week and whine and protest and say she was flunking the courses, that she wasn't smart enough. Why hadn't I listened to her? She can't compete with these kids. She can barely understand the textbook. And I told her, just keep doing what you're doing, and we practiced cognitive therapy. And then at the end of the summer school, I said, how did you do? And she said, I don't want to tell you. Like I told you, I was going to flunk these classes, and you wouldn't believe me, Dr. Burns. I said, well, I didn't know, but what grades did you get? She says, I don't have to tell you. And you say, well, of course you don't have to tell me, but why won't you tell me? Did you flunk? She said, no. I said, well, what grades did you get? She says, I got an A+ in both classes. And I said, well, how did you reconcile that with your belief that you were such a stupid person? And she says, well, I think I must have fooled the teachers, or they made a mistake grading my final or something. And I said, listen, Sharon, the new class of Stanford students is about to start, and I think you should go over to the dean's office and tell them to admit you to the freshman class. And she says, Dr. Burns, you're so stupid. This is early September, and they're going to start classes in a week, and Stanford has been closed out on admissions since last spring, and it's almost impossible to get into Stanford, and I haven't graduated from high school yet. You're just crazy, Dr. Burns. And I said, well, why don't you go and try anyway? And say that Dr. Burns said he wanted you to be in the freshman class at Stanford, and tell them they can call me if they want to, know why. And so the next day I got a call from the dean of students, and it was saying that we have this unusual girl here who says you said we're supposed to put her in the freshman class at Stanford, but she hasn't finished high school, and we closed out applications months ago. And she told us she's had a lot of mental problems. And what's up? And I said, well, you don't have to do anything that doesn't seem right, but she's a sleeper, and I think she'll surprise you. She's one of the smartest people I've ever run into. And he said, well, would you continue to support her if we did this? And I said, well, of course I will. And he said, well, she'd have to take the SAT exams. And I said, well, yeah, that'd be okay. And he said, well, they're actually going to be given tomorrow, and I can get access right at the end of the exam to her, see how she did. But we wouldn't let her in unless she does well enough on the SATs. I said, that sounds great. And he called me the next day and said, how did she do? And he said, she got the highest score in the United States. We're going to let her in. I'm so sorry. I'm just, crying away. But, I'm just so proud of her and so proud of all the people I've worked with in my career. But, for a hopeless case, she was doing pretty good. And so she started up as a freshman, and she kept insisting that she was going to flunk out, and she wasn't smart enough. And she ended up first in her class 4 years later, and went on to a very prestigious graduate school and had a fantastic career. But it's just a kind of living example that we can sink pretty low when you're depressed and you feel worthless, you feel hopeless, you're just certain you're not good enough, and you put yourself down. And she certainly had a case to be made for hopelessness. But I never give up on anyone. She was the biggest battle I ever had to fight. She was a real fighter, but that's how I knew what tremendous power she had and determination. But I'm sure there's a lot of beauty in you too, if you've been struggling and putting yourself down and feeling inadequate and not good enough or anxious or lonely or, well, I don't know how to end my story, but that's it. I've often thought, boy, I wish I could call her up and say hello. And do you remember me? But we can't do that once we have to let our patients go. But she's always with me, and I'll never forget her. So anyway, thank you so much. And we've got other stories for you and techniques for you and a lot of resources if you like this type of thing.